Hey everyone, I'm not sure if I'm ready to relive this experience, but I think I need to share it, if only to get some closure. What happened to me and my friends a few months ago still haunts me, and I'm hoping that maybe someone here can relate or offer some advice. So here goes. Like many high school students, my friends and I wanted to blow off some steam after our final exams, and what better way to do that than by renting a chalet for the weekend? It's something of a tradition around here. Get a group together, have a barbecue, and just hang out without any worries. We weren't exactly rolling in cash, so we went for the cheapest option available. The chalet we found was in an old, secluded area, far from the main tourist spots. It was run down but big enough for all of us, with 2 floors, a kitchen, and 3 rooms on the second floor. The exterior of the chalet was weather-beaten and dilapidated, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds clawing at the foundation. The windows were grimy and dusty, obscuring the view inside. The yard was wild, with a gnarled, ancient oak tree that cast eerie shadows across the property. Inside, the chalet was just as forlorn. The wooden floors creaked ominously underfoot, and the air had a musty, stale odor, like it hadn't been properly ventilated in years. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, decorated with a pattern that was once floral but had long since turned into a muddy blur of colors. The kitchen was small and sparsely equipped, with old rusty appliances and a cracked linoleum floor. The living room, though spacious, was cold and uninviting, dominated by an old, saggy couch and a rickety coffee table that wobbled with the slightest touch. However, as the chalet is extremely big and spacious, we thought we'd hit the jackpot, but in hindsight, I wish we'd never set foot in that place. About 20 of us showed up for the barbecue, but only around 10 of us planned to stay the night. The others decided to head home, and honestly, I can't blame them. The place had a weird vibe from the start, and looking back, I think they might have sensed something was off. But we were young, excited, and maybe a bit too adventurous for our own good. By midnight, most of the group had left, and the rest of us were getting bored. The chalet was in a pretty isolated area, and there wasn't much to do once the barbecue was over. That's when someone suggested exploring the old abandoned hospital nearby. We'd heard stories about it, how it was supposed to be haunted, how people had seen things there that couldn't be explained. But we were skeptical. We'd all heard ghost stories before, and none of us really believed in that stuff. So 5 of us decided to check it out, while the other 5 stayed behind at the chalet, probably thinking we were nuts. The hospital wasn't far, but the closer we got, the heavier the air felt. It was like something was pushing down on us, making it hard to breathe. The hospital loomed ahead, its dark silhouette stark against the night sky. The building was massive and imposing, with tall, arched windows that seemed to watch us as we approached. The entrance was covered in a thick layer of grime and rust, with a set of iron double doors that were half broken and barely hanging on their hinges. When we finally reached the entrance, I felt this deep, bone-chilling cold that didn't seem natural. But we pressed on, telling ourselves it was just our imaginations playing tricks on us. The interior of the hospital was just as unsettling. The main hallway was lined with old, peeling paint and broken tiles, and the flickering light from our flashlights only seemed to add to the oppressive gloom. The walls were covered in graffiti, the windows were shattered, and the whole building seemed to groan under its own weight. Every step we took echoed, making it impossible to tell where the sounds were coming from. As we made our way through the hospital, we started hearing noises. At first, it was just the occasional creak or rustle, but then we heard something that stopped us in our tracks. It was a noise unlike anything I'd ever heard, a mix of screaming and crying, but twisted, as if whatever was making the sound was an unimaginable pain and fury. The sound seemed to be coming from the second floor, and despite every instinct telling us to turn back, we kept going. The staircase leading to the second floor was narrow and rickety, and each step felt like it might give way at any moment. The walls on the stairs were covered in grime and cobwebs, and the air grew colder with every step we took. When we reached the second floor, the air felt even colder, like we'd walked into a freezer. The sound was louder now, echoing off the walls and sending shivers down my spine. We were all scared, but none of us wanted to be the first to chicken out, so we pushed forward. That's when we saw it. A huge, menacing shadow emerged from one of the rooms ahead of us. It wasn't just a trick of the light. This thing had form, mass, and it was moving toward us. It was massive, with an almost human shape, but there was something horribly wrong about it. Its form seemed to writhe and shift, as if it was struggling to maintain a coherent shape. The moment we saw it, we all felt this overwhelming sense of dread, like we were in the presence of something truly evil. We didn't wait to see what it would do. We turned and ran as fast as we could, not caring about the noise we were making or the fact that we were practically falling over each other in our panic. The sound of that thing followed us, a deep, guttural noise that was half growl, half scream, and it didn't stop until we were out of the hospital and back on the road to the chalet. When we finally burst through the door of the chalet, we were all out of breath, terrified, and trying to explain what had just happened. The others could see we were serious and that we weren't just messing around. After hearing our story, everyone was on edge. We decided to lock all the windows and doors, hoping that would be enough to keep whatever we'd encountered out. The chalet seemed to grow colder as the night went on. We huddled together in the living room, trying to calm down and convince ourselves that we were safe. But around 2 a.m. we heard a knock at the door. It was soft at first, like someone lightly tapping, but it made us all jump. Who could be knocking at this hour? Maybe it was one of the other groups from a nearby chalet playing a prank on us. I figured it was nothing and got up to answer the door. But when I opened it, there was no one there. I stepped outside, looked around, but the night was still and empty. The only sound was the rustling of the trees in the wind. I closed the door, trying to shake off the unease, but 5 minutes later, the knocking started again. This time it was louder, more insistent. I was getting irritated, thinking someone was really messing with us, so I stood right by the door, ready to catch whoever was doing this. The moment I heard the knock, I yanked the door open. But again, there was no one there. Now everyone was freaked out. There was no way someone could have knocked and gotten away that fast, especially not without us hearing them run off. The logical side of me was struggling to find an explanation, but I could feel a growing fear that something was very, very wrong. The knocks kept coming, and each time I opened the door, there was no one there. It was like something was toying with us, trying to wear us down. After the 4th or 5th time, we decided to call it a night. We packed up our stuff and headed upstairs to the largest bedroom on the 2nd floor, all 10 of us crammed into one room because there was no way any of us were sleeping alone that night. The room we ended up in was massive but decrepit. The wallpaper was tattered and peeling, and the wooden floorboards creaked loudly with every movement. The bed was old and lumpy, with a sagging mattress that looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades. The curtains were moth-eaten and stained, and the air felt thick and oppressive, like the room itself was holding its breath. We locked the door, barricaded it with whatever we could find, a wardrobe, an old dresser, and a couple of chairs, and tried to get some rest. But sleep was the last thing on our minds. The atmosphere in the room was tense, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. As we were chatting quietly, trying to distract ourselves, we heard another knock, this time on the door to our room. It was louder than before, and it made all of us freeze. The knock came again, more insistent, like whoever or whatever was on the other side was getting impatient. My heart was racing, and I could feel the fear in the room growing, thickening the air around us. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, marched over to the door, and threw it open, shouting, "Who's there?" But there was no one there. Except this time, something was different. As I stood in the doorway, I felt a gust of cold air rush past me, as if something invisible had just entered the room. The temperature dropped instantly, and I could see my breath in the air. The others felt it too, and we all looked at each other in silent terror. I slammed the door shut, but we all knew deep down that something was now in the room with us. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. It was like the walls were closing in, suffocating us with fear. We sat there in silence, too scared to move or speak, just waiting for something to happen. And then we heard it, a soft, almost inaudible knock, but this time it came from inside the room. One of us turned to look at the far corner of the room, and that's when we saw it. A figure was sitting on top of the cabinet, barely visible in the dim light. It was hunched over, its limbs twisted and unnatural, and it was smiling at us with a grin that sent ice-cold fear down my spine. The smile wasn't human, it was too wide, too toothy, and it radiated pure malice. The figure's eyes were dark voids, absorbing the faint light around them. Its skin was a sickly gray, mottled with dark patches that seemed to writhe and shift. Its fingers were long and claw-like, and it moved with a jerky, unnatural motion, like a puppet with frayed strings. We were all frozen in place, too terrified to move. The figure just sat there, watching us, its eyes glinting with something that I can only describe as hunger. I tried to open the door, but it was stuck, like something was holding it shut from the other side. I was on the verge of breaking down, tears welling up in my eyes as the fear overwhelmed me. Then one of our friends, the most religious one in the group, started praying. His voice was shaky at first, but as he continued, it grew stronger, more determined. One by one, the rest of us joined in, our voices rising together in a desperate plea for help. As we prayed louder and louder, the figure on the cabinet began to twitch, its smile fading into a snarl. It looked like it was in pain, like our prayers were hurting it. The air around us grew colder, the pressure more intense, but we didn't stop. We kept praying louder and louder until suddenly the room door slammed open with a force that shook the walls. And just like that, the figure was gone. We didn't waste any time. As soon as the door opened, we bolted out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the chalet. None of us wanted to stay there for another second. We piled into the cars we had parked outside and drove off, not caring where we went as long as it was far away from that place. It wasn't until the next day, after we'd had some time to calm down and talk about what had happened, that we realized what might have gone wrong. We had made the mistake of exploring that hospital in an odd-numbered group, 5 of us. According to local superstitions, spirits are attracted to odd numbers, and they'll try to even things out by attaching themselves to someone in the group. We'd unknowingly brought something back with us, and it had followed us to the chalet. But what if it didn't leave? Even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that something is still with me. I haven't seen anything, but sometimes when I'm alone, I feel this cold, heavy presence in the room, like something is watching me, waiting for the right moment. I don't know if it's just paranoia or if that thing is really still here biding its time. All I know is that I'll never go near that hospital again. And if you're ever thinking of exploring somewhere that's supposed to be haunted, please, for your own sake, don't do it in an odd-numbered group. And if you do, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. You might not be as lucky as we were. Stay safe out there, everyone. If you enjoyed this story, hit like and subscribe to Horror Confessions to get notified about our latest chilling tales. Thanks for watching.